family, which is why he encountered the shooter on his fateful last day alive. Joe worked in the forestry sector. 65-year-old Lillian Campbell Hyslop loved living in Canada and was proud to be a citizen there. She moved to Nova Scotia from Whitehorse, Yukon, in 2014 to retire with her husband. Lillian loved to explore all parts of the expansive land that made up Canada. Her husband and child survive her. Most people who knew John were keenly aware of his utter fascination with police memorabilia, including police uniforms, equipment, and cruisers. However, his obsession wasn't because of a deep-seated desire to be a police officer or because he idolized police. No. It was quite the opposite, in fact. John believed that he was better than law enforcement and sought to prove he could do anything and everything they could. Eerily, John even went as far as impersonating an officer. John owned multiple decommissioned police cars, weapons, authentic uniforms, and a variety of other police equipment. Essential police gear wasn't enough for John, though. He also owned a search and rescue Zodiac, which is a high-speed inflatable search and rescue boat. He used his own private company called Berkshire Broman Corporation to purchase the cars and other larger items. If he would have used his own name at the government-sponsored auctions, his 2001 assault conviction would have popped up, preventing John from purchasing the police cruisers. John's most prized possession was a 2017 police cruiser replica. He kept this vehicle hidden out of view in a warehouse on property that he owned. The car was authentic and came complete with a non-working communications radio, a radar, emergency lights, and original RCMP decals on the side. It was purchased from a federal government auction on June 27, 2019, for $10,990. When John made the purchase, the car was plain white, and all accessories were taken out of it. Before it went to auction. John told his neighbors and other community members that he was just fixing up the cars to be driven in parades. In addition to the 2017 Cruiser, John bought a 2013 Ford Taurus for $2,998 in July of 2013. This car was left parked at John's Dartmouth clinic at the time of the shooting. The vehicle was also purchased through John's company. There were an additional 2 cruisers found on John's property in Portapique. There, they were burned entirely through. All the vehicle accessories John bought were found online, several through Amazon. John was born on July 5, 1968, and grew up in Riverview, New Brunswick. 51-year-old John was raised as an only child, but what he didn't know growing up was that he actually had a brother. John didn't learn about his sibling until he was an adult. The brother was given up for adoption as a newborn in 1970 and spent many years trying to track down his biological family. In 2010, the brother finally found and met his biological father. John invited his biological brother to his cottage when he was planning a birthday party for his dad in 2010. It was supposed to be a very happy occasion, yet a fight broke out between John and his dad over title to a property, and John threatened to kill his parents. The police were called. As a result, John's newly found brother decided he wanted nothing to do with the family. The situation is incredibly heartbreaking. Imagine searching your whole life for your family, only to discover that they were violent and not the kind of people you wanted to associate with. John's family moved around a lot when younger. His father drove heavy equipment at the Stelco steel plant in Hamilton for a time, but then he went on to work in various factories across the United States. He finally settled down and decided to earn an income by buying and selling homes in the Moncton area. Family and friends said it was a violent household, with tons of fighting. John's uncle claims that John always hated and resented his father. All of the family could see it. John attended Riverview High School and then went to the University of New Brunswick in the late 1980s. During his high school years, John would tell his peers that he wanted to be in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which was ironic because John was not known to be particularly law-abiding in his teen years. He sped everywhere he went, used stolen siding to refinish his parents' home, and shot air-powered rifles around town. While John was a student at the University of New Brunswick, he started an illegal business where he smuggled cigarettes from the U.S. and sold them to other students at school. His cigarette smuggling business went so well, in fact, that John even paid for his school with this side hustle that he was incredibly proud of. So proud that he continued this business for many years. At one time, John quit university to become a mortician, yet he went back to school to become a denturist. Though he changed career directions, John liked to brag to other students that he had substances at home that could dissolve bodies, which just weirded people out. After graduating from university, John started his career as a denturist straight away. For reference, a denturist specializes in patients who have dentures. Despite his medical ambitions, John continued to be drawn back to illegal activities and those that broke the law. Many of his friends who had long criminal records often partook in the same types of illicit activities that John sanctioned, such as conning people out of money, hiding large amounts of money at various properties he owned, bragging about buying and selling stolen merchandise, and using illegal radars. Despite his aversion to staying out of trouble, John was successful. He ran 2 offices called the Atlantic Denture Clinic, one in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and one in the Halifax area. He owned 6 properties in all, and lived on an expansive piece of property with his wife. One of John's neighbors described him as a sociable person who had severe jealousy issues. John was controlling and possessive over his wife, Mary. He dictated everything she was allowed to do, even with her own money and income. John was said to be both physically and verbally abusive, even in front of crowds of other people. John had no shame and believed he was right anyhow. Mary worked as an assistant in his clinic, located in Dartmouth. She was a dutiful and faithful wife, but John's uncle once claims to have witnessed John choking Mary, accusing her of cheating on him, though the police were never contacted. There was another incident in 2013 at a bonfire at Portapique. When John was drinking, and he threw Mary to the ground, choking her in front of everyone. He watched Mary like a hawk, and even if he saw or thought that she appeared to be having too much fun at parties or get-togethers, he would tell her it was time to go, and immediately leave, taking her home. John would park his car behind Mary so she couldn't go anywhere, and had no basic trust in his wife. Yet they were together for almost 20 years, and Mary didn't do anything to warrant this kind of problematic behavior. One of the couple's neighbors, Brenda Forbes, who was a military vet, reported that in 2013, Mary randomly knocked on her door saying she was afraid of John. Brenda told Mary that some places helped women in need. She could get help there, but Mary said she was too scared to leave. Brenda and her husband would call the police any time they suspected the assaults happened, but when the police investigated, Mary always denied that anything happened. When Mary discovered John was cheating and how many other women were in his life, John blamed Brenda Forbes for, quote, telling on him. That's right. Rather than accept responsibility for his own abhorrent behavior, John preferred to blame another woman for him getting caught. In a rage, John went to Brenda's home and started banging on her front door. After that, he began to stalk Brenda. The situation escalated to the point where John was parking in front of Brenda's house and would just sit there and stare at the home. John's predatory behavior finally became too much, and Brenda and her husband moved just to get as far away from John as possible. It is believed that victims Greg and Jamie Blair purchased the Forbes home in a very sinister coincidence. 6 years later, the Blairs were dead at the hands of the very man who drove the previous family away. John was married once before Mary, though that union ended in divorce in 2001, and neither marriage had produced any children. John liked women, and was known to sleep around. He was incapable of staying faithful, though he expected his wife to be obedient in that regard. He was known to many locals as someone who drank a lot of alcohol, and when drinking, his moods would range from friendly to aggressive and violent, sometimes all within a matter of minutes. His violence always seemed to rear its ugly head whenever he was drinking, and the majority of the time that he drank, he became out of control. John could go sober for months on end, but he always fell off the wagon and picked up the bottle. He didn't respect himself, and he especially didn't respect women. Because he had money, he assumed he could get any woman he wanted. John's anger wasn't geared just towards women, though. In 2001, there was a report of an assault on a 15-year-old boy. In 2010, there were death threats he made towards his parents. In 2011, an anonymous tip was sent to RCMP indicating that John had a large stash of guns and made statements about wanting to kill a cop. After that particular incident, a police bulletin was put out alerting police agencies about John, yet the bulletin was destroyed after 2 years.
Officer safety bulletins are very serious in the policing world, of course. They're not issued all the time. They're only issued, for very serious matters.
The investigating agency was the Halifax Regional Police, who sent their investigation to RCMP, who in turn did their own investigation. The RCMP even followed through with a visit to John's house. In 2013, a report was made of a violent attack on Mary, along with a weapons complaint. The 2001 assault ended with a conditional discharge, and no other incident resulted in a single criminal charge. Despite the lack of a criminal record, countless friends, family, and co-workers saw John's aggressiveness, but realized it was easier just to stay out of his way. John was intimidating and immediately made others nervous, particularly when he bragged about how he knew how to dispose of bodies and that in his spare time he built mini coffins. His uncle claims that their whole family knew of John's temper, but they were all too scared to go to the police. In fact, they were scared to death of him. At one time, John bought a building with plans to build a marijuana grow operation in a secret bunker. The property was located in Debert, Nova Scotia. However, after mold was found in the building, he stopped pursuing those plans. At his Dartmouth clinic, John kept a loaded pistol inside a pillowcase, inside the apartment above the clinic. He had a severe aversion to paying taxes, and frequently did work under the table at his clinics. His greediness paid off. John's estate was worth over $1.2 million, and it's impossible to determine how much cash money he kept stashed away at his many properties and businesses. He constantly fought with his family over money despite living a very lavish lifestyle, often buying expensive cars, motorcycles, and boats. John loved to be the center of attention, and hosting fancy parties and taking exotic vacations. He even owned a condo in the Dominican Republic and a beautiful beach log home in Portapique, which is the house he called the cottage. Sparing himself no luxury, John loved to buy exquisite jewelry. His business acumen was on point. In 2010, he bought Berkshire Broman Corporation, described as a tree trimming type business, though it is unclear what the business actually does. The man the company was purchased from had a lengthy criminal history, and John frequently made claims that break-ins at his properties were a common issue. He installed security cameras, which covered every square inch of his properties, and further complained that the police weren't doing their jobs by protecting his interests. John was even more upset that the police didn't investigate a break-in complaint he made, which is perhaps why he held such a grudge against police, though he clearly enjoyed imitating the power he perceived them to have. Yet as the COVID pandemic grew, so did John's paranoia. He became obsessed with the idea that the pandemic and ensuing financial crisis would put him under. At one of his properties, police discovered hundreds of dollars in a fireproof canister. However, when police searched John's phone, they found that he sent an email to a friend stating, quote, "I am enjoying this prelude to retirement." His anxious and paranoid behavior began to permeate into his clinics, and a former patient reported she stopped attending the clinic because of how uncomfortable he made her feel. He even went so far as to try to get the woman to work for him, paid her extreme, unwanted attention, and once tried to get her to visit his cottage. It was a crude, sexual remark that eventually prompted her to stop going. an employee at a sign shop in Troy,